Thank you very much. I see your PowerPoint.
Yes. Thank you so much. First of all, thanks to the organizer for giving this opportunity to reflect the work International Water Management is promoting and implementing as part of the CGR initiative. We thank also the participants for supporting through this online initiative, while we understand still there are challenges with the COVID. So I was asked to speak on the climate adaptation risk management focus, and I think this topic is very much aligned to the previous speaker, specifically looking at the adaptation and the global agenda. So I have three areas to be discussed today. Is on understanding the. I hope my slides are visible. Right. So I'm speaking on the understanding risk and investment in resilience, and a list of knowledge products that will be relevant for participants, and as well as from the policy relevance, how these tools and products are critically important. And I think the segment of our work will focus a lot on how do we build resilience with the focus of climate risk insurance. I think it was also very much highlighted. I think every focus in the national organizations, international organization is particularly focusing on achieving the global commitments, whether it is SDG, climate change, and Sendai framework. I think at the nexus of that, we are all looking at critically addressing the vulnerability of smallholder farmers, communities in enhancing their resilience, through which the participation of public and private participation is critically important. And I think this forum, what we are speaking on water-related disaster, brings specifically the focus of Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. So that's where we frame this particular presentation today. Now, if I look at the challenges we are talking about today, whether it is Asia or Pacific, and challenges with COVID, we see there is climate is directly impacting, whether we talk about mortality, the economic losses, but with the greater science and technology, the understanding on the importance of disaster reduction, providing resilient infrastructure, we are already seeing there is a declining in the mortality rate, whether we speak on the last 20 years. However, we see in terms of the economic losses are rising, whether we speak of the Thailand flood in 2011 or the last number of cyclones, we look at the problems in Southeast Asia. So there is a clear challenges of uninsured losses. This is a slide coming from various UN and global disaster database. And we know each year we are talking about 100 plus billions of economic losses are reported. And while we are talking about climate adaptation investment, whether it is COP and various other platform, we are talking about 100 billion. So there are no real challenges when we talk about the development plans versus the disaster losses. So I think countries need to look at how do we promote local scale development, adaptation issues. And that's where I think we need to really promote awareness on why risk insurance are critical, not just only at the policy relevance or at the high level government, but also looking at empowering farmers and communities. Now, we did some of the global analysis of looking at assessment on various risks, whether it is flood, drought, and landslide. And there is a detailed report is available in IMI website. But again, this really important for when we are looking at development targets, climate investment plan, countries and the global investors need to know what should be our priorities. So when we are today, CGR focus is more on system transformation, because there is always we look at progressive development. Now we are looking at system transformation as a whole, and we look at countries in Africa, South America, countries in South Asia, invariably having high risk. And it also came out very clear in the World Economic Forum report in 2022, again, points out how extreme risk and climate change are the top 5 risks we are seeing in the global challenges when we speak on from this detailed report that came out. Now, while these assessments are good at global, we also need to look at, at the scale where countries can make timely decisions. So adaptation is not just about looking just at the climate change, but also its exposure, its impact, its areas that are going to be highly vulnerable, and quantify them, right? So we looked at multi-hazard. So it's not just about looking at the biophysical element of the floods and drought, but also looking at the aspects of gender risk, aspects of the GDP, and then it's a massive data we put together and quantifying multi-hazard economic exposure and gender risk. So that really helps. We are working with ADB on this assessment over the years, and then we can say how DRR plans and DRM plans can be certainly strengthened by coming up with a consolidated or a synergized product. So that's where I am just messaging from the global product and how countries like South Asia can make use of digital capabilities and harmonizing a single methodology, and then how countries can certainly use this framework. Now, moving from there, I would skip this slide, but certainly I would say the other important element as a tool we are developing is called a hydromet optimization tool, which is very relevant for countries to know where and how hydrometeorological observation need to be installed. It's a earth observation tool. We have used it. As you can see here, you can look at variables like where the floods have happened in the last 50 years, where are the elevations that are really important for establishment of hydromet station, knowing where the extreme rainfall, where is the real variability of, because often in adaptation it's about variability, quantifying your rainfall variability, and then we have more data sets to use that. And again, you come with a decision support tool, and clearly looking at a zonation of understanding is coming out where you are having a lot of variability, and how hydromet installations are very relevant for not just on as a disaster, but also looking at irrigation program, looking into coastal development. So I think these tools can certainly play an important role, not just for as a data as an element for policy development, but also identifying where the early warning systems need to be established. And again, there are a lot of low-cost tools are available. Often you may not have a good met stations, which may not really helping us to quantify the flood alerts. So often the problems we need to know where exactly these instruments need to be installed again. So that's where these instruments were developed. And again, we are looking at pilot case of a few countries, including Sri Lanka and India, to test these capabilities. Now I move to the last example of more evidences with some of the work we do in South Asia, the role of insurance in adaptation. So the questions we would like to look at in the coming years and through our evidence is how can insurance improve adaptation and increase resilience? And when is insurance, because often in adaptation, we can't just say insurance will solve entire problem. We need to rightly introduce this instruments as an insurance, because if you have early warning, if you have structural measures, if you have looked at policy relevance, multi-governance coordination, and also empowering communities through the form of risk transfer, that's where it will work. Alone, insurance may not able to help us in reducing the losses directly, but look at the long-term developments on adaptation focus. And here I'm trying to point out more example for the agriculture sector where we are working on. Now, it's not that insurance is just as an ad hoc product. Again, if you look at one of the slide coming from the Ministry of Environment, Germany, over years, we are talking about these risk insurance is evolving, specifically looking at the nexus around climate change, sustainable development, and also the DRR focus. Now, again, across all this, I think insurance is very critical in achieving the SDG. And it is very clear out of the 17 SDGs, we can see at least 6 SDGs have a direct role. And I think there is a great development coming across various global initiatives, like it was presented by UNDP as well in the previous presentation. Now, what it is trying to offer us, it's trying to look at insurance. In some instances, people consider as a basic risk, but you can look at across all the segments, whether it is in terms of how communities could be recovered from the flood damages, or from the public institutions like Ministry of Finance recovering from a major earthquake, or how do you provide timely response strategy for providing a timely early action, providing early finance, and how do you even prevent the losses that's going to happen. So we need to have early financing on some of the risk infrastructures that already exist. It's not, doesn't mean that we go into a lot of new infrastructure. Having said that, we also need to look at some of the risk already exist in the communities, some of the flood affected, flood prone, or drought affected, how do we insure them on a regular basis? Then we can certainly look at how adaptation is going to flood proof them or drought proof them, and working against the climate risk, right? So there are various products are available. We are not going to go more detail of all the instrument, but specifically I will be focusing on the meso level insurance product, right? So in terms of what the example we are going to look at, as I said, we are working with government, we are working with farmers, we are working with agriculture service provider, right? So the product what we are trying to provide is a bundled insurance solution in South Asia. The problem is, as I said, the variability is quite high, and people are still not realizing how do they need to embed this with the credit, and how do they harness the digital technologies and the agriculture technologies, right? So what we are providing is through this initiative bundle solution, we are providing seeds, we are providing weather forecasts, we are providing advisory services, we are also ensuring the private sector and public procure the grain on a timely, so that there is no post harvest losses. And again, we are linking with the credit link as well in the coming years. Now, there are a lot of challenges we looked at across the years where we tested this product in Sri Lanka and also in Bangladesh. But the greater goal, what we have seen is the increased investment in the private sector and the public sector, and also bridging the gender equity among the youth and marginal farmers, and also bringing increasing use of genetic resources, because a lot of new varieties that are tolerant to flood, resistant to drought. So those instruments need to be viable and accessible to those communities when we talk about the real-time adaptation process. Now, instead of going into more on our product, I would just give, we have a various guidelines are developed. More we could discuss over the chat message given the limited time. But again, these instruments are tested and piloted in different countries. As I said, we are testing in 3 states in India. Over 15,000 households are already been tested, rolled out this product. Participation of farmers is very active in this, because they are also measuring on a regular basis weather data. So there is no tampering of instruments. Always there is a perception insurance doesn't give the good claim. So they know when the insurance can work and when it will not work. Depending on the trigger, these instruments are helping. Similarly, we have a product rolled out in Sri Lanka again. More we could discuss, but again, the product is linked to the pest management. So when there is a armyworm, a diseases comes in, and how you could really provide a compensation to the farmers, right? So again, these are done in a meso scale with limited farmers, but how do you work with the private sector to transform this into a larger product, right? So that's what we are working with the various private sector, agri startup, etc., piloting, co-designing with them, and de-risking with private sector, whether it is seed company, weather provider, and look at dialogues with the policymakers to transform this at a scale where it is accessible, and also ministries are providing credible incentives to support and scale them, right? So this is the model we have. So far, we are testing and doing it. But given the limited time, I would skip speaking on that. Thank you again for giving this opportunity.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr.